today. Welcome, welcome. For those of you who are new to me, I am Rozyglow. I'm a psychic soul coach and also a sacred union coach. And I really wanted to make this video today because in case you missed it, I did host a masterclass about the mother wound. And it was all about the 3 essential keys to healing the mother wound so that we can unblock the flow of receiving. Now, that was like the preamble to this, because what really fascinated me and brought me to even create this masterclass was actually how our relationship with our mother affects our relationship with our lover or our partner or our spouse, those we have romantic relationships with. Most of us never think about this. Hey, Kate, lovely to have you here. You know, like we typically are aware of like the daddy wound if we're femmes and we're looking and we're interested in those of the opposite sex, but the mother wound and how that relates to receiving and how that relates to the kind of love that we have, that's an interesting topic. So I thought I'd jump on today and just give you some questions to really consider and really encourage you to go and check out the whole of the masterclass, because there's so much gold in there. And I gave you some exercises that you can work with literally to deal with the stuff that comes up. And this is a very personal thing, okay, because you know, my passion is very much about how our time in the womb and our birth and the first 7 years of life kind of wire us either to survive or to thrive. And this is really important for us to understand the world that we're living in today. You know, we know the world is not as we want it to be. Thanks, Terry, in the sense that there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of suffering, there's a lot of struggle, there's a lot of stress, there's a load of lack. And yet, in order for it to change, we keep trying to deal with the symptoms rather than the cause. So I'm really passionate about this because at the heart of it all is sacred union. At the heart of it all is our relationship with ourselves, with our souls, with the divine, with each other, and then how each generation is basically created. What are we created from? Are we created from love? Are we created from fear? Are we created from struggle? Are we created from thriving? And how can we create future generations that are wired to thrive, to be solution focused, to actually expect peace rather than war and struggle? That's where it's all coming from. Okay, so for us to dial this back to our personal stories, are you currently happy in your relationship? If you are in a relationship, are you satisfied and fulfilled in that relationship? Now, okay, you might have got complacent, you might have got a little bit, you know, comfortable. There's all sorts of things that happen over time. But what I mean is, are you getting the love you want? Are your needs being met? Do you know what your needs are? Have you actually spoken out for what you want and what you need, or are you too scared to rock the boat? So that's for those of you in relationship. Are you satisfied? Are you fulfilled? Are you feeling as though you can express your needs, your wants, your desires, and that they are going to be responded to, respected, loved, met, or not? And if you're not in a relationship, what's the story? What keeps showing up? You're doing the work. Yeah, you're doing your work. You've done the clearing. You've done the reprogramming. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. But, you know, the same story keeps showing up. And oh, no, of course, it's got nothing to do with my mother. I've got a great relationship with my mum. It's nothing to do with her. And I'm like, let's have a look over there. Let's have a look at those places that we go, oh, no, no, it's not that. Because these are typical blind spots, right? And here's the fascinating thing about the mother. And, you know, I say this with the utmost love of mothers. I am one myself. And anyone who is a mother knows that you kind of get this inherent guilt, blame, shame programming that gets passed from one gen to the next, which is judgment. And this is something that's very important for us to address as we create a world where we are wired to thrive rather than survive, right? Because in many ways, the role of the mother that's been passed from one gen to the next is not a healthy concept, okay? The endless giver, the one who puts everyone else first, the one who, you know, will self-sacrifice, right? This is not really in the long run going to be a helpful way for us to create a thriving generation. It is definitely characterized by the age of Pisces, and martyrdom is a big part of the Piscean age. It was very much about sacrificing ourselves for the greater good. You know what I'm talking about there, but that's not actually healthy, because you know full well, and many of us use this analogy, that if you are trying to help other people put their oxygen masks on and you haven't put yours on, your time is limited. Whereas if you put yours on first, you have a much better chance of helping others in a sustainable and regenerative way, right? So that's for the helpers out there. When it actually comes to our sacred union relationships and having our needs met, what is important for us to remember is that the original relationship we have, the first provider and even the first protector, if you like, is actually the mother. It's the womb space. we grow in the womb space. So what is typically the feeling vibration that we grew up in? Because when we were formed from the egg and the sperm meeting together, and then the first 3 months where the basis of the nervous system, the brainstem, the heart, the cardiovascular, the digestive system are all starting to be formed, you know, we're laying the foundations then of whether we're basically wired to survive or thrive, which parts of our brain develop more than the others, whether or not we get a chance to, you know, experience happy hormones and neurotransmitters that, again, create the sensation of fulfillment, of satisfaction, of being received, being met. And most of this is unconscious for the mother. Most of it is like not stuff that she's aware of. And I know in previous generations, we didn't have the awareness we have today. And even today, even though we have the research, it's not been made public knowledge enough for us to know how to manage stress in a way that we minimize the negative impact, and how to actually learn to meet our own needs so that we can support our babies to thrive, even in challenging times. Right. So this is why I do what I do, because I see these imprints of relationships being mirrored in the relationships we have. So, you know, I'll give you a couple of examples, and I just want to leave you with a few things to consider, because, you know, it's much easier for us to do this when we don't have a very easy relationship with a mother, or we didn't have a very easy relationship with our mother, when there was conflict, when there was awareness of unmet needs. You know, when I was 14 years old, I was a very, very unhappy teenager. I felt very disconnected, didn't feel like I belonged in my family. Typically, the relationship between my mum and my dad, bearing in mind that they separated when I was 7 years old, was full of conflict, full of volatility. It wasn't aggression, but volatility. Lots of judgment, lots of hurt, lots of, you know, projection, lots of victim energy. I saw my mum go through some really tough stuff. I saw my dad feeling really hemmed in, trying to work out who he was. I mean, you know, as a child, I experienced it differently, but the kind of, you know, imprint of the mother that my mother was with my dad was actually really quite different to the mother that was with my stepdad. So my stepdad came into my life when I was 8, and we really hadn't been introduced many times before we went to move in with him. And he was very, very different to my dad. My dad's very emotional and very sort of tactile. My stepdad, not so emotional, not so tactile to us as children. And I'm saying this, bearing in mind this is a mother, you know, a mother-lover scenario, because actually the way that the mother is responded to by her partner actually impacts the way she responds to her children, right? And how her energy is and what we actually pick up on. So, did you have an easeful relationship with your mum? Do you generally feel you get on well with your mum? What do you feel the gifts are that your mum gave you? What did your mum teach you about the opposite sex, about men? What did you learn about your mum, about your dad through your mum? Not things she said, but generally, how do you perceive she felt around him? Did she feel happy in his presence, resentful in his presence, longing for something in his presence? And, you know, if we take this further back and we actually take this into our time in the womb, if you were to allow yourself to let go of thinking for a minute and just go into feeling and consider, okay, what are my baseline emotional states? Before I talk myself around, before I do a mindset shift, before I, you know, do my I ams or call in prayer or whatever it is I actually do to shift my energy, how do I feel generally? What is my general disposition? What is my general expectation of life? Do I wake up anxious? Do I wake up with a list of to-dos? Do I wake up dreading the day? Do I wake up excited, hopeful, in positive anticipation? Do I start beating myself up and negging out when I look in the mirror? Like, what is your relationship with you like? Because this is something that will be first and foremost imprinted on you from your time in the womb, because it was your mother's relationship with herself. How did she feel? You know, I know that for my mum, she felt shame around her body. She generally felt anxious and stressed and fearful of things. She was a huge people pleaser. And I learned the art of overgiving massively through her. Now, how did that impact my relationships? Well, for me, It was very much about, try and make myself what I thought that other person wanted me to be, try and get their attention, try and get them to love me, make myself indispensable in their lives, make myself like overkill, basically, which would then just push guys away more and more and more. Because I didn't know how to just be sovereign in my own energy. I was reaching out all of the time, right? And not honoring my own worth. My worth was dependent on how other people responded to me. My worth was, or my sense of deserving was based again on how much I was helping other people to be happy, right? That was how I was kind of wired. So I welcome your comments on this, because I think it's really useful to consider that there's no one definitive place we can go here. And that's why I want to invite you to book a Sacred Union call with me, because I'm passionate, as you know, about working with those who feel as though they want to have big impact in this world. And, having a happy and healthy relationship with yourself, with your partner, with your family is a huge impact in this world, right? You don't know who your child is going to be in the future, what they're going to do in this world. But I can promise you this, that if they have the kind of start which allows them to see healthy relationships the parents have with themselves first and foremost, and then with each other, then these children are much more likely to be doing things in this world that are going to help support the planet towards a thriving reality and humanity towards a thriving reality than the other way around. It's when we have all these unmet needs that we don't actually know how to go about meeting, that we go around trying to control everyone and everything. And we end up basically emulating the kind of survival of the fittest, Darwinian theory, which there's a lot of questioning on, and Bruce Lipton did an amazing job of questioning it. And I don't know if you've caught the interview I did with him yet, but it's over on YouTube. It's had some really, really positive praise. People are watching it and getting this experience of, oh my goodness, I've never seen it quite like that before. I've never heard him explain it like that or with my interaction. So go check it out on Rozyglow YouTube if you haven't already. And please do, if you feel, this is like one of those subjects that's quite hard to share publicly about, which is again why I'm saying, this is important to address because it's impacting everything in our own lives. And just to, I'm just going to go through a couple of things here. When you have had a relationship where you're really close to your mum, it's actually much harder to see how perhaps her relationship with your father or with herself has impacted you in such a way that actually it's preventing you having the kind of relationships you want. What are your subconscious expectations? What are your conscious expectations? And are they actually yours, like you, the human you really are, or are they your baby self or your mum's desires, your mum's wants, your mum's expectations? Do they actually fit in your life or not? Because very often when we have these unhealed scenarios, so we've got wounding from our own, time in the womb and childhood, etc., where maybe, for example, a father might have provided materially, but not emotionally. So the impact was there where the bills were paid, where you didn't want for anything material, but you're love starved, then there's going to be an impact on you. If that was the experience of the mother, then how is that going to reflect in your life? What are your expectations of a masculine? You're going to want them to provide emotionally and physically, right? You're going to want them to give you what your mum got and a whole load of stuff that she didn't get. But if she didn't get it, you don't have a program for it. So how are you going to receive it? You don't believe you're worthy of it. You don't believe you're deserving of it, but you demand it. You want it from an unmet need space without having accessed it inside of you, right? Now, in my world, I went for constantly, it was trauma bonding all the time. Now, I'm not talking about dad. That's another story. We'll get there as we get towards Father's Day. And there's a very interesting aspect of how the placenta is actually made entirely from the male DNA, the sperm DNA, okay? So there's another energy there we'll explain and talk about in terms of protector energy. But in terms of the main protector and the main provider, your time in the womb, you were provided for by your mum, and how she provided for you depended on how well provided for she was by your dad, by those in her community, by society, by work, by the NHS or the maternity services, by all of that. Do you get it? So if she wasn't well provided for, how can she provide for you in a good way, in a way that you actually receive what she didn't? And here's an interesting thing that I talk about in my coaching all the time. We either emulate what was done or we go the complete opposite and we try and overcompensate. So now look at your relationship with your children, especially if you're like a mother with a daughter or a father with a son. even opposite sex, but let's just really go down the mother relationship, irrespective. Hello, darling Sarah, thank you. Irrespective of the dad for now, let's just look at the relationship with mum. So whether you're in boy body, girl body, whatever is like your gender that you were born with, what was the connection? What did you receive? Okay, did you, let's just feel what's really coming in here. Did you feel well provided for? Was love conditional? Did you feel responsible for your mother's happiness? All right. Did you need to keep her happy? How are your children showing up in your life? Are they super sensitive to you? Are you having to be super sensitive to them? What is it that keeps showing up as an issue that you don't know how to address? Right. My child was hypersensitive as a child, as a baby and as a child. I didn't know how to meet those needs because they'd never been met in me. I was shut down as a child all the time. This isn't appropriate. You don't speak like this. You don't do this. If you do this, I'll shout at you or I'll punish you, right? Even in the instances of like when something scared my mother that I had done that, she now knew I was safe, instead of like the hug and the love, I'd get a wooden spoon on my bum, right? So how we show love is very interesting. So again, this is not a live where I can give you lots of answers, but I can invite you to explore this and to understand that when I talk about motherboard rewiring, I'm talking about the inherited nervous system, the inherited subconscious programming around love, around lack, around receiving, around being worthy, being deserving, where you stand with guilt, blame, shame, judgment. All of this is mother wound stuff. And, if you're not getting something you want in life, and bear in mind, like lack, often we think of lack as money, but lack of money, lack of time, lack of opportunities, lack of recognition, lack of visibility, lack of sensitivity, lack of love, appreciation, lack of compassion, lack of anything in your life is going to come from the place where you haven't actually received it and downloaded that program. And there's a couple of things that Bruce said in the interview. It was just amazing. Again, please let us remember, this is not a blame mum story, right? Mum's fault? No, not grandmother's fault or great-grandmother's fault or anyone. Hurt people hurt others, right? So we are living a legacy of so many generations of unmet needs that for us to actually overcome this and create peace in one generation, which is why I exist today, we have all the research in the world available to us, right? We don't need everybody to go through this process. We need enough people to go through it that it has this butterfly effect on everyone else, right? And it's much less than I thought it was going to be in terms of how many really need to do this deep work. So motherboard rewiring is really the upgrade from surviving to thriving. Ultimately, most of us have been wired to survive rather than thrive. And the way the world is, and I'm going to make a separate video about the holographic nature of reality and why we revert back to our old patterns, even though we've cleared them. And what it actually means to clear your personal story within the collective stories, the cultural, societal, religious, gender-based, relationship-based. There's so many layers, and most of our modeling in the collective is incredibly toxic. Okay, so getting to root means repatterning our time in the womb, right? And also our birth and our first 7 years of life and everything that's ever happened in our lives for the first time since then, bearing in mind that we carry the memories in our blood of our bloodline ancestors and their stories, right? I haven't got time now to go through all the different ways that our DNA seeks out healing, but typically speaking, when something has happened in our ancestry that hasn't been addressed, has been swept under the carpet, hasn't been talked about, the descendants will recreate subconsciously the circumstances in their own lives to bring this story to life and to resolve it. That's what we do. So how can this impact your relationship today? Well, if you don't ask, you don't get, right? And, being able to ask for what we want and what we need and to speak in such a way that we can be heard, that our truth can be received. It's not a tacky projecting. It's not whiny and whingy, because we've all learned to get attention in different ways. My sister will be the first to say to you that she learned with my mum that being sick was what got my mum's attention, right? So my sister was often ill as a child. She had so many antibiotics. She had loads of tonsillitis. She's had all these issues going on in her life since then. For me, how did I get attention? I was naughty. I was rebellious. The word no did not agree with me as a child and as a teenager. And actually, my earliest memory was pretty traumatic. So I didn't have trust in my mum or my dad. I certainly didn't think they knew what was best for me. They kept making crazy decisions, right? So I took it upon myself, probably from around the age of 8 or 9, that I couldn't really trust the adults in my life. So when they said I couldn't do something and I really wanted to do it, guess what? I did it, right? So I ended up getting quite a lot of negative attention. And the kind of programming I had around love meant that I was constantly seeking to be validated through others. And personally, I traded sex for love from quite early in life. You know, some attention, some gratification, some of that longing that I wanted and needing, and I never got. I never got unconditional praise. There was always shaming. There was always all these other things going on. And again, please don't expect that I came from a really terrible family. I didn't, right? My parents were loving human beings. They were good people. My dad is around on this planet, as is my stepdad, but they're, you know, on the surface, we were a loving, happy family, as is true for so many. So my invitation to you is to consider that there is something there for you. Okay, in the areas of your life where things are not currently the way you want them to be, I bet you anything, there is a root relating to your mother connection. Okay, and when you start to explore that and allow yourself to really play with that, it's taking your focus away from where you're used to looking and looking somewhere else, and asking that question, okay, well, how do I want to feel? You know, what have I received? What do I want to receive? Where is the discrepancy? And again, in the masterclass, which you can access if you go to my link tree on YouTube, on Instagram, the masterclass replay is there. It's free. Okay, just sign up for it. You can also go to rozyglow/events, rozyglow.com, rozyglow.com/events, and you can receive that replay of the masterclass as well. And, you know, in that particular session, I offered you a desire mapping call, but today it feels really important to say, those of you who want a different relationship in your life, you want sacred union, then, you know, book your sacred union call and understand that the lack in your life is all related. Okay, whether it's lack of the kind of relationship or the time or the money or the opportunities or whatever it is. And there is more and more research coming out now around neurodivergence and our time in the womb, and even the link to hypermobility, the link to sort of autoimmune diseases, so self-attack, you know, fibro pain diseases, that kind of thing. It's very interesting what's coming up. I've been really looking into the research around that. So what we're learning to do is to start to connect to what we haven't had before, which we can do in a holographic universe. We can do that. It's just having the support to do it, and the support to deal with the blind spots, because we can't see our own blind spots. We will always avoid where we most need to go if left to our own devices. Guaranteed, right? You will not go where you most need to go because you're going to avoid it. It's too painful, right? You will have all these beautiful self-defense mechanisms in place to go, oh, no, I don't need to go there. That's not where the problem is. It's over here. I'll look over here. I'm fine with looking over here. And this is the point is, you know, would it be valuable to you to have someone who gets this really deeply, be able to point out to you, hey, you know what? This is really where you want to look. This is where you will create the most amount of change in the shortest amount of time and allow more flow into your life. Because if you don't feel deserving and you don't feel worthy, it doesn't matter how many times you tell yourself you are. If the back end doesn't support the front end, it ain't going to happen, right? So that's where rewiring is so important. And as I said in the masterclass, I did talk about, you know, the 3 essential shifts that need to happen, and rewiring is a part of that. And that is a process. It's not just a decision. It starts with a decision. And typically when people come to me, they've done a lot of work on themselves. They're often therapists, coaches, really esteemed in the field of helping others, doctors, psychologists, you name it, right? Healers. And, you know, this is where it's challenging to come into that sense of, well, okay, I know a lot. I know so much around my profession, and yet still these are areas that are challenging for me. Do I feel I can trust someone? Am I ready to trust someone to help me have that? And this is where you go towards people that have the resonance that you would like to align with. You don't necessarily want their relationship, their life, their anything, but you actually want to be in resonance with things that they have already resolved within them. And that's why you will go to someone who is already somewhere you want to be. So in a happy, healthy relationship, if you're not in one yourself, right? To be able to kind of download the codes. And, you know, you'll hear Bruce say this 95% of the time, we are not operating from our conscious creative mind. We are operating from our thinking brain, which can only ever create more of the same. So knowing that and knowing that that's not in your control and it needs to be shifted is why, again, you decide it's worth it for you to invest in yourself and actually take the journey of going deep into the dark and allowing the lotus to come out of the mud. And when I say deep in the dark, damn, I wish I hadn't said that, because that sounds like it's loads of hard work. And what I would say to it is this: shining light into the spaces that, up until now have been shrouded in mystery or fog or confusion or just seem too painful to look at. Having someone support you and hold your hand through it is just how you have breakthroughs. I am a coach myself who always has a coach, because I need to be supported to my next step. And ultimately, I really value the fact that I know from sort of child development point of view that from complete dependence comes complete independence. Now, as children, when our needs are met, we learn they're met, and therefore we then have that expectation they will be met in the future. And therefore, because we have that expectation, we align with that, and that's what we see evidence of. So if you didn't have your needs met, you can see how this works in reverse. And this is why every time you up level, you then need to stabilize at that new up level, and then you grow again into the next level, because we're integrating into wholeness. And that is exactly why I do the work I do, because for us to hold the new frequency on this planet, we have to hold it in ourselves first. And it's one thing to access it, and it is absolutely about love. It's absolutely about mind-blowing orgasms. It's absolutely about feeling at one with the divine through our relationship with others. It is about all of these things. They're the most important things for us to align with if we want to create, it's not if we, for us to create a thriving community on this planet. Love feeds the world. Love rules the world. That is the truth. That is what will allow us to thrive and create paradise on earth. And if we don't address this and focus on this, and we think it's superfluous because we've got to pay the bills or this or that, whatever, then we're missing the point. Now, I say this knowing that when you want a solution appears. Okay, when you are ready to start to look at things that you haven't looked at before, they will show themselves. And there's always going to be a next step available to you. If you are willing to take that next step, and just take that next step whilst holding a vision of what you really want to align with, then the next step will reveal itself too. No one's going to come into where you are now and meet you right where you are and go, here you go, we'll sort it out here, right? Change comes from getting uncomfortable, stretching beyond what you know. So, if you want a relationship different to the one that you've got, you are required to be a different version of you in order to receive it. I know I'm worthy of the love that I get from my beloved. I know when I first started being in this relationship, feeling like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. He just gives and gives and gives and gives and gives. And I had to really learn to accept that I was worthy and deserving of that and not sabotage it. Because it's easy to go, there must be something wrong with them because they're giving me so much. No one's ever done this before, right? So this is where getting comfortable with receiving is so important, and knowing that wherever you're not receiving, you're not comfortable with receiving. Because if you were comfortable with receiving in that area, you would have to break a code of conditioning, right? So what are the codes of conditioning that you're currently holding onto subconsciously that keep recreating more of the same? And would you like to shift those codes of conditioning into new codes of conditioning so you can actually have what you want? And if the answer is yes, then make sure you book that call. So let me actually put it in the comments here. And, this is where you do get the opportunity to, get some clarity, make some inroads, really get to that place where you go, this is what I most need to do next. And often we need to hear it 10 times before we go, okay, there is really nothing else for me to do now other than this. I'm going to do this. This is the most important thing I could do. And when you're really clear with that, and you know that every other option that you're considering is going to take you back to this, then this is the next logical step. And because you know it, you open up to it. Now, there's something very interesting about humans. We like to cognitively understand things, which is why science is so important. It's one thing to know things on a sort of spiritual level, right? And you've got that sense of deep knowing. But when you also can fathom it with this brain thing that connects to the field and the mind, then you give yourself permission to actually have it. For me, it wasn't until I read the book, The Honeymoon Effect, and I knew that it was possible to have what I wanted. Science said it was possible. I was like, well, damn it, if it's possible, then I'm having it. Up until then, it was I want it, but does it really exist? Is it real, or is it just in the movies? Do they really have a healthy relationship? What happens behind closed doors? There was so much suspiciousness, right? So I'm just going to leave that there. And I'm going to invite you all to ponder this and to really explore this idea. Like, as you ask questions, you will get answers, but please don't think, all right? Don't try and think the answers. Just from your heart, put a question out into the field and then notice what you start to see. Because we have one of the rainbow gems I work with in my coaching programs is noticing fixes more than fixing. This came from a healer called Annie Webb. And basically, when you look at something and you notice it, it affects things. It's like the quantum field, particles and waves, right? If you look for one thing, you'll see that. If you look for the other, you'll see that. You couldn't see them both at the same time, although more recent stuff is saying that you can. But the main point is what you look for, you will find. All right. So when we train ourselves to be in resonance with what we actually want, we receive it. But first of all, we will see where we're out of resonance with what we want. We have to claim it first. Then you see what's out of resonance and you go about aligning it. And as a result of that, you then hit that resonance, you hit that vibrational set point. And with that vibrational set point, you then stick with it. And as you stick with it and you hold the line, then it can start to manifest from thought form to plasma to physical. All right. And that's what we're in the game of doing. So I hope that excites you, because this is exactly what I teach people to do on my coaching programs, whether you join me group or one-to-one, whether you start your journey with yoga or our online multidimensional yoga, whether you have a one-to-one session. The important thing is start somewhere, right? Start to pull away the bricks from that wall, and then the wall comes down. But all the time you tell yourself you can't, you won't, you can't, whatever reason, you're right. You're absolutely right, because the universe will keep saying yes, right? So I love you. I really would like to continue this conversation. It's the foundation. And here's why it's so important. The next full moon is eclipse season. We start with a full moon in Libra, all right? We've just had a new moon in Pisces. This is the womb of creation. Now we're going into relationships, and all the stuff that is out of alignment in our relationships is going to show up. All the places where we're not in resonance with what we say we want. Okay, so the resonance is key. You can have what you want. You just have to be a vibrational match for it. And that's what I'm in the business of supporting people to do. So your next step, book your Sacred Union call. Have a look at the questions just in themselves. They're super activating. They'll really give you a sense of where you are and where you want to be and what's in the way. And then we can jump on and have a look at how your mother relationship is affecting all of that. And then what can be done to change it. It's a no-brainer. Book that call. I love you. And you can join me, for anyone who's actually interested in the Fearless, Loved Up and Limitless program, which is my signature motherboard upgrade. We've already started the program, so I'm taking people in now every 2 weeks, taking in newbies until we hit our numbers, and then we're going to close. So just bear in mind that this is my last rodeo in terms of being the main coach, and I'm now, I think I've got 3 spaces left where I'm going to be the main coach, and then we'll be doing some shuffling around. I'll still be involved in the program, but if you want me to be doing the major hand holding for you, then now's your time. You're very welcome, my darling. Have a beautiful day, everybody. And just remember, we're doing this for ourselves and for the collective. Be selfish to be selfless. Learn what you need to about yourself so you can really serve others, because we are the example and we're the mirrors. All right. You're amazing. I love you lots and lots and lots. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for subscribing. If you're watching in a Manifesting Style Piece Utopia, drop us a comment. Let me know how this was for you. Thank you so much. Take care for now.